Hello and welcome to this Sophos Certified Training course for Sophos XG Firewall. This is Module 3, Network Protection. The protection features of the XG Firewall are brought together and managed in the firewall rules. In this module, you will learn the different types of firewall rules that can be created on the XG Firewall and how to configure and manage them. You will also learn how to enable and configure additional protection features and policies, including intrusion prevention and security heartbeat, and use these to improve the security provided by the basic firewall rules. Sophos XG Firewall is built around firewall rules, which bring together policies for web filtering, email filtering, web server protection, and traffic shaping into a single rule set. This gives administrators a single place to configure how all traffic is processed by the firewall. All of these policies are created using zones and objects to make configuration and management as simple as possible. In addition to showing the source, destination, services, and action for each firewall rule, on the right-hand side is an indicator section that shows which areas of a policy are enabled. By hovering your mouse over the indicator, a pop-up shows further details about each section of the firewall rule. You will notice that there are different icons for the firewall rules which denote whether they are a business application rule, a network rule, or a user rule. Firewall rules are either user network rules or business application rules. User or network rules are very similar, with the main difference being that the user rules will control traffic based on a user identity and just not the IP or MAC address. In user or network rules, you can apply policies for web filtering, application control, intrusion prevention, and traffic shaping. Business application rules are used to publish and protect internal or publicly hosted business applications and servers, such as SharePoint or email servers. To make protecting common business resources as simple as possible, Sophos XG Firewall comes with a number of pre-configured templates. The color and shape of the firewall rule icon background indicates whether the rule allows or blocks traffic, or if the rule is disabled. Disabled rules also use a grayed-out strike-through text to make them easy to distinguish from active rules. Firewall rules can be reordered more easily by simply grabbing the move icon on the left-hand side of the rule and dragging it to the new position. On the far right of the firewall rule, clicking the ellipsis will open the menu where you can enable and disable rules, edit them, clone them, and more. XG Firewall 17 introduces grouping of firewall rules to make managing larger rule sets even easier. To add a rule to a group, use the menu to either create a new group for the rule or select an existing group. When creating a new group, you simply need to provide a name and a description. The firewall rule will be added to the group automatically once it has been created. The group icon shows the number of rules that are in the group, and groups can easily be expanded and collapsed to control what is on screen. Whole groups of rules can also be dragged to a new position in the same way that individual firewall rules can. Rules can also be removed from groups by selecting Detach in the menu. Filtering firewall rules and searching by rule ID fully support groups and present results in a way that maintains the group structure. As we have already mentioned, the XG firewall is a zone-based, object-oriented firewall. This makes creating rules and policies on the XG firewall both easy and flexible. Basic network rules can be created to control traffic between different zones or between networks and hosts within the zones. Traffic that is allowed by a basic packet filter rule can then be examined further by modules such as the IPS module and the client's security heartbeat in order to determine if that traffic is going to be allowed or blocked. The initial setup wizard creates a default network policy rule on the XG firewall to allow traffic from the LAN out to the WAN. Depending on the option selected during the initial setup wizard, various security options will be enabled for this rule, including enabling a malware scanning and a basic web policy. You will also notice an automatic firewall rule is created to enable the XG firewall to perform email filtering. To begin creating a new rule, start by clicking on the Add Firewall Rule button located in the top right of the Protect Firewall section of the WebAdmin in the XG firewall. Next, click on the User Network Rule option. When creating a new rule, it is useful but not required to have all of your objects and services created ahead of time. Begin by naming the rule and adding a description to help others understand the purpose of the rule. Then select where the rule is placed in the current list of existing firewall rules. Using one of the three options, select if you want this rule to allow, drop, or reject the traffic that is going to be processed by the rule. In the Source section, use the Add New Item button to select the zones that contain the source networks. Make sure to click the Apply button in green when you have checked off any zones to include. If you would like to isolate specific networks or hosts, select them in the Source Networks and Devices. A schedule can also be applied to this rule so that it is only processed during certain times of the week. The default is to process the rule always. Lastly, in the Destination and Services section, select the destination zones and networks that the traffic will be going to, and finally, the services that you would like to allow or block. Make sure to remember and click the Save button in the bottom left to complete this rule. Tip: you can easily view the configuration of the zone, network, and service objects by hovering your mouse over them. Further down in the firewall rule, you can enable user matching. This makes it a user rule and not just a network rule. We will look at this in the authentication module. You can also enable malware scanning of FTP, HTTP, and HTTPS. Note that if you enable HTTPS scanning, you will need to ensure that the XGCA certificate has been installed on your clients to prevent certificate errors in the user's browsers. In the Advanced section, you can select which policies you want to apply to the traffic that matches the firewall rule, enable synchronized security. We will look at this in more detail later in this module. Enable and configure natting and routing. And finally, you can choose whether to log traffic that has matched the firewall rule. In most cases, traffic through a firewall needs to be bidirectional. That is, we not only allow people internally to communicate with the outside world, but also people and servers on the internet to communicate with some of our internal servers. There may be many reasons that this would need to occur, from receiving email from external servers to allowing users access to resources inside the network when they are out of the office. Whatever the reason, servers need to be published through the firewall in order to provide services and receive information. In the XG firewall, the option to allow external traffic into the device that does not originate from an internal source is done with a business application rule. Let's look at creating a basic destination NAT or DNAT rule in the Sophos XG firewall. This is done by first navigating to Protect Firewall and then clicking the Add Firewall Rules button, just as if you were adding a new firewall rule, only this time we will select the option for Business Application Rule. In the Add Business Application Rule screen, first select an application template. There are a number of pre-configured application templates that can be used. However, we are going to look at creating a basic DNAT rule. Once the application template is selected, we can give the rule a name and a description and select the rule position. Next, select the zone from which the traffic will be coming from. This will help define where the XG is expecting the requests to originate. Then, define the allowed client networks by selecting IP objects. This is often set to any, and define any blocked IP objects that will not be able to access the service. Select the destination host or network, which is the address on the XG firewall that will be accepting the request, and select the service or services to be forwarded. In the Forward To section, the server that the packets will be forwarded to is defined. In the Protected Servers, select one or more servers to forward the information to, and optionally, you can change the port used when the traffic is forwarded to the protected server. Note, if you select multiple services or a service that is not a single port or range of ports, you will not be able to change the destination. In this case, to be able to change the ports, you would need to create separate rules for each service. Select the zone that the server resides in. This is used to apply policies for protecting the server. In the Advanced section, we can apply an IPS policy to the rule in order to scan any traffic. And finally, there is an option to log all traffic and not just dropped packets. As always, make sure to click the Save button when you have completed making changes to the rule. The XG firewall comes with a number of predefined IPS security policies, which can be found in Protect, Intrusion Prevention, IPS Policies. These policies cover most of the everyday scenarios that an administrator would encounter on an average network. The first 6 policies cannot be modified, but are very useful for zone-to-zone security, while the last 4 policies can be used as is, but are able to be customized to better fit a network's security needs. An administrator could also create their own IPS policies by clicking the Add button. An IPS policy consists of a name to identify the policy. The name is limited to 15 characters, including spaces. The description should be used to better identify the purpose of the policy. You can optionally clone an existing policy to bring in all of the existing rules. When this information is filled in, click the Save button and it will take you back to the main screen. From there, edit the policy to begin adding rules. After clicking on your newly created IPS policy, you can begin adding IPS rules or editing the existing rules if you cloned another policy. In this example, we are adding a rule to protect Windows users browsing the internet. As with most items, give the new rule a descriptive name. Using the Policy Rule Editor, you can quickly and easily select the desired IPS patterns by category, severity, platform, and target type with support for persistent smart filter lists that will automatically update as new patterns are added that match the selected criteria. For example, you can use the Smart Filter to select all signatures that relate to a specific application. In order to apply an IPS policy to a firewall network rule, edit the existing rule and scroll down to the Advanced section. IPS policies can be applied to both user and network rules and business application rules. In addition to the protection that can be configured in the security policies, there are global protection services that can be enabled, including protection against denial of service or DOS and IP spoofing. We will start with the spoof protection. Before you can enable spoof protection, you need to add at least one entry into the trusted MAC list. This maps a MAC address to one or more static IP addresses or a DHCP IP address, which are considered valid. You can then enable spoof protection in 3 ways per zone. IP spoofing, where packets will be dropped if the matching route entry is not available. MAC filter, packets will be dropped if the MAC addresses are not configured as trusted MACs. And IP MAC pair filter, packets will be dropped if the IP and MAC do not match with any entry in the IP MAC trusted list. In addition to these 3 modes, there is the option to restrict unknown IP on trusted MAC. With this option enabled, any traffic from an IP address which is not in the trusted list for the MAC addresses it is coming from will be dropped. So care should be taken with this option. A denial of service attack is a method that hackers use to prevent or deny legitimate users access to a service. DOS attacks are typically executed by sending many request packets to a targeted server, usually a web, FTP, or mail server, which floods the server's resources, making the system unusable. Their goal is not to steal the information, but to disable or deprive a device or network so that users no longer have access to the network services and resources. All servers can handle traffic volume up to a maximum, beyond which they become disabled. Hence, attackers send a very high volume of redundant traffic to a system so it cannot keep up with the bad traffic and allow permitted network traffic. The best way to protect against a DOS attack is to identify and block such redundant traffic. Here, we can see the configuration for a SYN flood attack. The administrator can set the allowed packet rate per minute for each source and destination, as well as a burst rate for each source and destination in packets per second. When the burst rate is crossed, Sophos XG Firewall considers it an attack and provides DOS attack protection by dropping all of the excess packets from the particular source or destination. The firewall will continue to drop the packets until the attack subsides. Because the device applies threshold values per IP address, only traffic from the particular source or destination will be dropped. The rest of the network traffic will continue to be processed as normal. The Security Heartbeat provides intelligent communication between endpoints that are managed in Sophos Central and the XG Firewall, so that they can coordinate their response to threats. The computer sends a small, regular heartbeat to the XG Firewall to identify itself and show that it is still active and protected. When an event occurs, such as a malware detection, information about the event is shared with the XG Firewall. The computer announces its health status to the XG Firewall, which can be either green, yellow, or red. If the XG Firewall detects an advanced attack, it can request additional details from the endpoint, such as the process name. The XG Firewall can use the heartbeat and health information from endpoints to control access to hosts and networks. Here, you can see what each heartbeat status means. If a computer has a green status, this means that the endpoint agent is running, so the computer is protected, and no active or inactive malware or PUAs or potentially unwanted applications have been detected. If the computer has a yellow status, the endpoint agent is running, so the computer is still protected, but inactive malware or a PUA has been detected. When a computer has a red status, it can indicate that the endpoint agent may not be running, so the computer may not be protected. Alternatively, it could mean that active malware has been detected, or malware that has not been cleaned up, malicious network traffic has been detected, or communication to a known bad host. Let's take a look at how Security Heartbeat works. As we mentioned on the previous slide, Security Heartbeat works with computers that are running Sophos End User Protection and are being managed by Sophos Central. The XG Firewall needs to be registered with Sophos Central, which will provide a list of computers that it is managing. The computer will initiate a connection to the XG Firewall, and if it is a computer that is managed by the same Sophos Central account, a two-way communication channel is established. Note that Security Heartbeat is only supported when computers are connected to the local network or to the XG Firewall via a VPN. Security Heartbeat is not supported in the WAN zone. Let's look at what would happen if malware is detected on a computer with Security Heartbeat. When malware is detected on the computer, Security Heartbeat will send event information and its new health status to the XG Firewall. The XG firewall can then prevent the compromised computer from connecting to other computers or servers, protecting them from possible infection. Once the Sophos Endpoint Agent has cleaned up the malware, Security Heartbeat will send its updated health status to the XG firewall, and the XG firewall can allow it access to hosts and networks as normal. On the XG Firewall Control Center, you can see the number of computers that have each level of Security Heartbeat Health Status in the User and Device Insights section on the right-hand side. In this example, we can see that we have one computer with a red risk status. By clicking on the Security Heartbeat widget in the Control Center, you can get more information, including the computer's hostname and IP address, and the user that is logged in. There is also a link to Sophos Central where you can get further details and take action to remediate the cause of the alert. Where the XG firewall has detected that a computer has been compromised by an advanced attack, it may have requested more detailed information, which will be available in the ATP section. Here, we can see threat that was detected and the name of the process involved. Over the next couple of slides, we will look at how to enable and configure Security Heartbeat on the XG firewall. Before you can start using Security Heartbeat, the XG firewall needs to be registered with a Sophos Central account. This can be done from the Control Center using the link on the right-hand side. This will take you to Protect Synchronized Security. Here, you need to enter the username and password of an administrator for your Sophos Central account. Once the XG firewall has registered with Sophos Central, you can select which zones you want the XG firewall to detect missing heartbeats for and enable synchronized application control. In Sophos Central, you can see the registered XG firewalls in Global Settings, System Settings, Registered Firewall Appliances. An XG firewall can only be registered with one Sophos Central account. If you have multiple sites, you can register multiple XG firewalls in your Sophos Central account, and computers will establish a heartbeat with whichever XG firewall is on its route to the Internet. Now that the XG firewall is registered with Sophos Central, computers will automatically establish a heartbeat with it, but the XG firewall won't take any action with that information. To take action based on Security Heartbeat status, you apply the restrictions in the firewall rules. Restrictions can be based on the Security Heartbeat status of the source or the destination. This means that you can use the Security Heartbeat to prevent a compromised computer from accessing other hosts or networks, but you can also prevent computers from accessing hosts that have been compromised. Restrictions are configured based on the minimum health status of the source or destination: green, yellow, or no restriction. You can also require a heartbeat. This means that a computer that is not running Sophos Endpoint Agent and is not managed by your Sophos Central account would not meet the criteria. This can be used to block contractors or rogue devices. Here are 3 firewall rules that have been configured with Security Heartbeat restrictions. In the first rule, the HB indicator for the heartbeat is yellow, so a minimum source heartbeat of yellow is required. In the second rule, the HB indicator for the heartbeat is green, so a minimum source heartbeat of green is required. In the last rule, the HB indicator for the heartbeat is green and has a plus, so a minimum source heartbeat of green is required, and clients with no heartbeat will be blocked. The heartbeat indicator on firewall rules only shows source-based restrictions, not destination-based restrictions. If a user's web request is blocked because of a source-based security heartbeat restriction, they will see the block page shown here. It clearly explains that the user's network access has been restricted because of their security heartbeat status. If access is blocked because of destination-based security heartbeat restrictions, that block page will explain that the destination is being blocked. IPS is a critical security module as it monitors traffic for any malicious content. IPS is most commonly used for monitoring inbound traffic, although IPS policies can be applied to any firewall rule and scan the matching traffic. There is always the chance that a user could introduce malicious code into the network from a source other than the internet, such as a USB drive. In this case, if the malicious code attempts to contact the outside world, an administrator could take advantage of Sophos's ATP, or Advanced Threat Protection, in order to monitor the outgoing traffic. ATP is a global configuration that monitors all outgoing traffic by default when configured. This is done by analyzing data from all of the enabled services running on Sophos XG Firewall, including DNS and HTTP requests, traffic passing through the firewall, and intrusion prevention. The configuration of ATP is very simple. From Protect, Advanced Threat Protection in WebAdmin, first enable Advanced Threat Protection by clicking the slider to the On state. Next, select if you would like to only log traffic, which will not stop any potentially dangerous traffic from exiting the network, or log and drop traffic to fully secure any outgoing traffic. When first configuring ATP, it may be useful to log only for a limited time in new installations to ensure that there are no false positives being triggered by applications in the network. If any hosts or networks are causing false positive responses, these can be excluded by adding their IP addresses, or you can choose to skip rules that are causing problems. Once you have enabled the service and set your options, be sure to click the Apply button in the bottom left and ATP configuration will be complete. If ATP detects a threat, whether in log only or log and drop, an alert will be recorded and the number of detections shown in the Control Center. By clicking on the alert in Control Center, additional information can be shown, including the offending IP address and hostname, as well as the threat and number of times the rule was triggered. Complete the following tasks in Lab 3. Task 3.1, Configure Logging. Task 3.2, Create Network Firewall Rules. Task 3.3, Install the SSL-CA certificates. Task 3.4, Install Sophos Central. Task 3.5, Publish servers using business application rules. Task 3.6, Configure IPS policies. Task 3.7, Enable Advanced Threat Protection. Task 3.8, Enable DOS and Spoof Protection. And Task 3.9, Configure Security Heartbeat. Prior to completing these tasks, you must have completed all steps up to the end of Lab 2, Task 9. On completion of this module, you should now be able to perform the actions shown here. Please take a moment to review these. If you are not confident that you have met these objectives, please review the material covered in this module. Click Continue when you are ready to proceed. Now that you have completed this module, you should complete Module 4, Site-to-Site Connections. Hello and welcome to this Sophos Certified Training course for Sophos XG Firewall. This is Module 3, Network Protection.